Welcome to Animal Justice Academy Lunchtime Live. I'm Kimberly Carroll. I'm the AJA director. And our topic today is 15 things we need to change in farmed animal advocacy messaging. And we have joining with us Aidan Kankyoku. Welcome to all of you lovely beings here with us live. And welcome to those of you who are watching the replay. And welcome to Aidan. Welcome, Aidan. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, really excited to be talking to everyone today. And I think Kimberly's going to talk more about this, but really aiming for like a discussion vibe today. So really excited.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we want to, we always want to make it so that we can do some back and forth and get your input and everything. Let me just give a little bit of an official sort of bio on Aiden so that you know where they're coming from. So since getting their start as a community organizer with Direct Action Everywhere in Colorado in 2015, Aiden has been immersed in studying the craft of disruptive mass movements. Besides spending years organizing in the animal freedom movement, Aidan has gained a broad perspective on mass movement building through hands-on experience at the Standing Rock No Dapple protests in South Dakota, amazing, and Extinction Rebellion in London. Aidan's also spent years seeking out new tools and methods for organizing, from better digital communication platforms to organizational governance systems like holacracy, in order to lay the groundwork for Pax Fauna and a new mass movement for animal freedom. And Pax Vanna has completed an 18-month study about the most effective farmed animal advocacy messaging, which we are going to dive into. So, Aidan, can you start off by giving us just a little info on Pax Fauna?
Yeah, so Pax Vanna, and I know it's kind of a wonky, opaque name, and that was a bit intentional because it came out of myself and a couple other colleagues that I knew through years of organizing with Direct Action Everywhere. So that was really my doorway into the movement, was with DXE. And I worked as a state organizer in DXE from about 2015 to 2018. Really believed in the theory of change, and in a lot of ways, I'm proud of a lot of things that we accomplished. But over that time, also saw that kind of the core theory of change that we were pursuing, we weren't achieving it. I think we were focused on the idea of, a mass movement. We looked at things like Occupy Wall Street as the kind of model that we were ultimately trying to create. And we'd experienced kind of stagnation and growth for a long time. So Pax Fauna kind of came out of that. And it was a decision by a few of us to sort of step back and see if we could, we'd been trying all kinds of things within the context of the organization we were working in to break through those kind of limits to growth. So we decided to try to step back and see if outside of that context we could figure out solutions to the problems we were experiencing, and a more effective path forward for the grassroots movement.
Mm-hmm. And so can you give us just a little overview, because we're going to go in deep in a second, a little overview about this research that Pax Fauna has dove into, and why you felt this particular research was where you wanted to focus your energies?
Yeah, so essentially we were looking to identify a few particular threads of research that could help us, address the challenges I was alluding to before. And the one that we're going to be talking about today, this narrative research, it's really inspired by a handful of things. I think we saw some really inspiring examples of this kind of research being done in other movements that seemed to really be a turning point for them. So a great example is the marriage equality movement. There was a big undertaking in the early 2000s to sort of design a new, reconsider the way that the movement had been messaging. And they shifted from, because of this research, they shifted from a very kind of technical message about, oh, it's important to have marriage equality because there's all these discrete benefits that come, this legalistic messaging about the discrete benefits that come from, being able to get married, and gay people are being denied that. And so it's this kind of technical civil rights issue. And they realized that that was really not working, but they've been doing it for decades. And the only reason that they realized that was kind of stepping back and doing this research. So we were modeled after that same thing. And hoping to kind of see if we could
And
find a
Aidan, can
connection.
I stop because this is really I always find looking at other social justice movements so interesting. So what did they pivot to? Was it like love is love? Is that
Yeah,
the
exactly. Yeah.
message?
So
Yeah.
what we're now familiar with as the very kind of love-centered messaging
Hmm.
and this kind of more, you could call it moral messaging or just exactly, the
Hmm.
love is love message instead of
Like
just
yeah, and an emotional message too, right?
emotional.
Yeah.
That's perfectly
Hmm.
it. An
Yeah.
emotional message.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
I would do want to shout out our friends at Animal Think Tank who we sort of think of as our like sister organization in the UK. So we're US based and very focused on the US context. I think they really helped me see what the value of this kind of narrative research would be. So
Amazing. Yeah, Aidan, we have Layla Kassam is part of the community here. She drops in on us and her sister Zara as well. And so yeah, we're big fans of Animal Think Tank. And they have done some interesting research. Kirsten, can you drop that in the chat as well? Just they're not quite as far along. I mean, they're still working on it. It's a work in progress. So that's why you're going to see a Google Doc. But they're doing big things as well. So yeah. Aidan, you're going to be sharing some recommendations that kind of go against the messaging that a lot of the advocates that are here today are using. So I think it's important for us to understand the scope of this study, okay, and all the sources that you pulled from. Can you give us a little idea of that, a little sense of that?
yeah, and I'll just say again, so we modeled the research that we'll be drawing on today after examples from several other movements. So this nothing quite like this had been done in animal advocacy. There was some great research on messaging around food systems change in general that wasn't like animal centered, but more things about like organic and GMOs and stuff. But also, like we mentioned, marriage equality, and then there's a big study on racial justice that we modeled it after. And so what we did, kind of think of it in 5 steps. Started with just a literature review of the existing research on messaging. And there's a lot of, and I think this speaks to maybe another reason that we decided to pull this together ourselves with our background as grassroots organizers, not as researchers. And we do have now some kind of technical research chops on the team at Pax Vanna, but as we were getting started, it was like, why are we the ones doing this? And part of it was, well, we were looking around at the research landscape in the animal movement and seeing that um, we didn't see anyone doing this kind of rigorous research who really had much of an understanding of the dynamics of grassroots movements and what kind of role these movements can play in, a larger movement ecosystem. So there were some studies that were maybe pretty dismissive of things like disruptive tactics or, the importance of just different tools that really define the grassroots kind of wing of the movement. So
Yeah, and I think folks here probably have, read some of that work and kind of gone, ooh, it feels a little like it's not very nuanced, so you were determined to have sort of multi-layered nuance around this.
yeah, definitely. And I think that the design that we came up with was maybe specifically meant to address some of the limitations of a very quantitative and very like lab centric approach. So that said, first step was to just really review the literature that exists on specifically public opinion and animals and messaging. And each of the 5 steps that I'm going to name is published as a separate report. If people really want to go deep dive on our website, you can. It's a lot of reading, but if you really decide that that's something you're interested in, or any one of the pieces.
Yeah.
So literature review, and then we did an analysis of the narratives currently in use by both the movement and by our opposition and also by the media, which, not so much being a neutral third party, but is like a third party with its own agenda. So considering the different goals of those three kind of sectors and then looking at what narratives they're currently using, and just that was going to be able to bring us into, first, okay, make sure we know what is currently being used and we can kind of test that and see what else might come out. But then, so those gets into the really big step that was most of the work. Is the next 2 steps were a prolonged qualitative research. So the first phase of that was one-on-one interviews. I just realized I'm like tapping my hands on the table. I don't know if everyone can see it. So
No,
anyway,
I wasn't
I'm
even
on step
hearing
3
it.
in the middle here. Um, was one-on-one interviews. So we recruited people off of Reddit for a 30-minute interview that was very open-ended. So we would pull, the first question we would ask is basically what comes to mind for all across these. And we ended up doing about just over 70 of the 30-minute interviews with people off of Reddit. So about, in that was the first phase. And then in the next phase, we did another 100 hours of focus group interviews with large groups. But now in these one-on-one interviews, we would pull people in and ask, what comes to mind when you think about animals used for food? And we chose that question to try to be the most like neutral way we could of framing it. We didn't, at this stage in the research, we didn't want people to know that we were animal advocates. But you'd be amazed. Like, again, we came up like the most neutral question we could come up with. Almost universally, the response would be, "Oh, I don't like to think about it. I mean, it's so upsetting what's happening.
Interesting.
People eat meat. Oh. So that's there, right? That really right away we definitely saw a confirmation of what lots of other researchers found, that there is really this contradiction and these conflicts and how people hold these views. But so anyway, so in that I'll try to skim through this quickly so we can get into the actual recommendations. But we iterated that script over 8 rounds in order to kind of zoom in more and more on what people in there, how were people in there? Maybe let me give one sort of framing to all of this. There's a particular study, or trend in studies from that first round that I mentioned that really informed how we did these interviews. So we saw on the one hand people saying, as many as a third or half of people saying they would support a ban on slaughterhouses or a total ban on animal farming. People might have seen these surveys before. There's reasons to maybe question that, but there's something there that, like, okay, in some circumstances, people are willing to support these like really bold, transformative parts of like the animal movement's agenda. And on the other hand, in those same surveys, same group of people, 98% of them would say, whether to be vegetarian is a personal choice and no one can tell me what to do. So what we were really trying to find in these interviews is what, in people's own words, what are they thinking? How are they formulating their supportive view of our agenda as animal advocates? And can we figure out how to communicate in a way that activates that version of the public? Because if there was some switch that we could flip where suddenly we're talking to that public instead of that 98% hostile public, wouldn't that be great? And so yeah, all right, maybe that's enough of.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, and again, all of this is in the on the website as far as how the study went. So if anybody wants to get in, deeper with that, it's all there. Okay, so we're going to go through the 15 recommendations, and that it's a lot, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on a few of them that maybe are a little harder to get, and we'll breeze through a few others. And the first one, Aidan, is probably going to be a harder one for people here to hear to take. So tell us about this one.
Yeah. So the way that we summarize this is that we really recommend that animal advocates shift from consumer-centric ways of talking about our issue to a civic frame or a voter-centric way. So we want to, but basically exactly what I was just describing, that schism in those surveys where there's like 2 versions of the public that we could be engaging with. And one, they're pretty hostile to us, but one, there's a lot more support relatively, a much better, basis for us to start from. And what we found is that really the best way to understand those 2 versions of the public is, one, they're thinking of themselves as consumers. They're wearing their consumer hat. And, consumer is one role that pretty much all of us in a modern society sometimes occupy. When we are shopping at the grocery store, when we're out deciding what products to buy, we're thinking of ourselves as consumers, even if not, explicitly. And that brings up a certain set of values and assumptions and ways of viewing the world. So it really is strongly associated with this kind of personal choice, value of personal choice and autonomy, and this like no one can tell me what to do attitude. I can like this, just all this choice. And it really limits our awareness of that when we're looking at the world through this consumer frame. What's outside the frame, what really we're blinded to, is the role of government policy and corporate policy and all these big forces in actually shaping what choices are available to us and what choices we decide to make in the moment, whether that's, advertising that's influencing our behavior, or subsidies that are making one product artificially less expensive, or, just the fact that you walk into a grocery store and it seems like there's all these things, but actually most of it's just corn, right? And because, so there's this illusion of choice in the consumer lens that is really harmful to building, our ability to connect with the public over our issue. If we can shift to where we're talking to the public as voters and we're finding, or not, voters is one great way, but where they're in this civic role, where instead of thinking about their own consumer choices, they're thinking about what kind of society do I want to be part of? What kind of society do I want to help create? What collective action through government and through other vehicles of, collective civic action that we have available to us, what kind of actions do I want to take to create the world that I want? And what that really means, what I'm kind of skirting around and what maybe Kimberly was alluding to is about why this is hard, is veganism. Our focus on veganism really strongly activates that consumer lens, and maybe has been counterproductive in ways that we didn't understand so much before this.
Wow. Okay. So, say somebody had been doing like most of their farmed animal advocacy had been go vegan, go vegan, go vegan. Where would you suggest they shift their energies to?
So, I want to preface my answer to that by saying that this is to me an incomplete answer. Like that is the next question, I think, for us as a movement to really grapple with. How can we actually meet the public as voters instead of as consumers? And it's harder. One reason maybe that is just that it's easier to figure out how to ask, talk to people about veganism. Politics is it's an interesting question, and we don't have a complete answer, and I'm really excited. I think one reason that I'm excited to be talking about this is hear from more and more people about how we might do this. I mean, one obvious example, you're all talking about a big vote that happened in, sounds like,
in Parliament. Yeah.
in Parliament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the starting point of what we're kind of calling for, is where we want, if we could get to a point where the public thinks of the animal rights movement as a mainstream political issue that they expect to see politicians have, be having to take a position on. And that's how do we get there? That's the outcome. That's not the strategy, but that's kind of what we're looking for. So let me give an example of a strategy which we have here in the United States, which we're very lucky to have and does not exist in a lot of places. It's only even in about half the states in the US. We have this thing called ballot initiatives, where you can circulate a petition among voters in a jurisdiction and get lots of signatures. And if you get enough signatures, you put that issue on the ballot and people have to vote on it directly. That's like the dream here of what it looks like to engage the public on animal rights as voters rather than as consumers. That's not available everywhere. So, what it then looks like, I think, is shifting our activist energy into looking at politics and starting to ask, how can we get, maybe starting at the city council level or at lower levels of government, how can we make our issues a salient part of politics in that place, and where politicians are having to take a position on it, and there's important issues going in front of them, and then we're really engaging the public about that. So we're maybe in addition to talking to the public about their diet changes, we're making them aware that maybe people that you vote for have control over how what happens to animals in the food system, and asking people to put pressure on their politicians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I guess the idea is that we're basically getting allies to work towards a problematic society, as opposed to, like, we're trying to get the public to be allies in this problematic society, as opposed to saying, you need to change, you're the problem, you need to change now. And in the meantime, while we're getting all of these people as allies, there's messaging getting through. They've got their defense, their defense wall has gone down because they're now an ally, they're part of it, so much more likely to be able to hear and see what's truly going on, and for that to resonate and maybe create change. Is that sort of the idea?
Right. That's a really good reflection. Because our movement, to the extent that our movement is currently, organized around veganism, that's a very high bar for people to, and of course we all know, it's not actually that hard, but to most people, it feels like a very high bar to be able to identify with the movement. So there's a lot of people who are pretty sympathetic to a lot of our goals as animal advocates, but they don't feel like the movement, they don't identify. And let me give an example. With direct action everywhere, we used to really have this goal. I mean, Dixie was also kind of trying to shift from talking about veganism as much to talking about like systemic change and things.
Yeah.
And we had this goal that we wanted non-vegans to feel like they could actually take action. Like we wanted people who were not vegan yet, but who supported, animal rights to be able to take action with us and feel like they could be part of it. And that never panned out. We had lots of times where people who weren't vegan would like come to an event, and then they would never come back, and we pretty much always heard like, oh, I just felt like a hypocrite being there. Like I was like, how can I be part of this protest when I still eat meat? And maybe some people would just solve that problem by stop eating meat, but most people would solve the problem by not coming to the protest
By
anymore.
trying to get as far away from the awareness as possible. Yeah.
Right. And is there a way that we can shift like what it means to be part of the animal movement, to not require this, again, what for most people feels like a very high bar of personal sacrifice, but just be something like I mean, the comparison here would be other mainstream political movements. Like if you're pro-choice, or, you don't walk into a pro-choice meeting and anyone has zeroed in on you and, checks to see whether you're in your personal life, like really conforming with the agenda of the pro-choice movement in some way. Or maybe a closer example is the climate change movement. When you show up to a climate change protest, no one asks like, well, have you taken a plane recently, or do you own a car? We all know those things are really harmful to the climate, but most, it's just not part of how the movement defines itself, because
Yeah,
it's
like nobody would be
politics.
part of the environmental movement if
True.
they were expected to be at this very high bar of environmental responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead, people are able to identify with it if they support the political agenda of the movement. And that makes the movement much stronger and able to actually exercise political power.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to pretend that I think we can transport ourselves straight there, because I do think that there are unique challenges, like that thing about people feeling like they're hypocrites if they eat meat. Um, it's not all on us. There's a give and take there, but you know, to start that process of becoming a political cause, that people can say, "Oh, I'm pro-animal," doesn't necessarily mean that they're vegan yet, but they support our agenda and they're willing to, you know, it's going to influence their vote, or it's they want to be part of a political coalition that includes that in its
Yeah,
agenda.
well, Aidan, I'll say, I mean, Animal Justice, our mothership organization, I mean, we focus on political, legislative, and court change, and all, that's sort of our leading. I mean, we also do undercover investigations and advocacy, but that's what most people see, and we bring in tons of people that are not vegan. I think from what I've heard, a lot of those people eventually do, because we're also in the midst of all this system change. They're learning all these issues. They're seeing the undercover investigations. It's very, but had our bar been, we're a vegan organization, and we are a vegan organization, but if our bar was, you can't be part of us if you're not vegan, then we'd have nobody, like very few.
That's
So,
awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, that
yeah.
feels like a proof of concept here. So,
Yeah.
maybe I'll sometime later I'll have to pick your brain about how
Yeah,
to keep this
absolutely.
vegan.
I think one of the things that folks are wondering about here, and we are going to spend time, like, because this one's such a big point, and it sort of informs the others, is the idea that so Debbie, for example, said, but did Gandhi not shut down the British textile industry by urging Indians to stop buying those products and purchase traditional Indian garb instead? We do vote with our dollars in a capitalistic society. So a lot of people are saying about the money. So that's not what you're advocating. You're not advocating that we don't go after corporations and food companies. You're just saying that sort of one-on-one vegan outreach is maybe not as effective as we think it is.
Yeah, maybe I'm saying there's a few different things to be said
Okay.
there. So
Okay.
yes, one is if we just the narrowest version of what I'm saying is it's not, if you are trying to win over one person to our cause or our agenda, it's you're probably going to have more success, at least getting them to open up and feel like they maybe share a goal with you. If we talk about this as a political change, like for example, a question I might, ask in outreach is like, well, do you think the world would be better if we eventually evolved away from farming animals, from having slaughterhouses and animal farms? Um, that's not a question about their, I mean, they might read into that, and maybe even I'm using that as a leading towards like, okay, their personal diet, but just on its face, that's a question about society, social change. Not it's not putting all the responsibility on them. So that's maybe the narrowest version of what I'm saying.
Like that's a starting point. So because Jeremy's saying I think they would only support a watered down agenda, which I'm not sure gets us anywhere. But what you're saying here is this is the gateway. The gateway is to bring folks under the umbrella through more systemic institutions, sort of working towards the dismantling of these very sort of damaging institutions, and that's the doorway.
Yeah, and then so that's one side of it is this. If we want to just talk about this purely as like a messaging or as a
Yeah.
rhetorical strategy, then that's
Mm-hmm.
what it is. There is another side of it though, which is maybe the larger strategic side. And I am going to push back on the sort of we vote with our dollars
Mm.
thing. So a great comparison here is how we're used to thinking about food is really through this consumer lens. Like it's not just about animal rights that people are used to thinking about this. That's the sort of default lens, but food in general, the public in general, really when we think about food, we picture ourselves going to the grocery store or a restaurant. We don't really have much of a model. The people on this call are different. We're now educated about these things, but the vast majority of the public never think about where that food is coming from, or they don't know very much about it. There's some great research that that inspired some of ours that showed like, oh, if you kind of on the one hand you try to ask Americans like where does their food come from, and they picture these like bucolic pastoral, you know, small farms, that's just like where it all comes from. But like actually they know that's not true. And if you push a little bit, they like whiplash in the opposite direction and they have this like cartoonishly over exaggerated version of like hyper industrial food production. The point is people don't really think about what's happening beyond the grocery store shelf. A counterexample to that, another product that we buy that we could think about the same way, but in fact we think about it very differently, is healthcare. So Americans are very used to Americans, Canadians, probably most people in Western countries are very used to thinking about healthcare, unlike food, as a policy issue. We very much understand that choices that the government makes, choices that huge corporations make, have way more of an impact on the choice that we ultimately make in like purchasing a health insurance. And I know you guys don't even have that. This is actually kind of a US specific thing.
That's all right. We know enough
Super
about
crazy situation.
it.
Um, but so if you'll indulge me, then that's a great example of, I mean, fundamentally the dynamics of the two are actually quite similar. It's a product in a market. It's a capitalist society. It's a free market, supposedly. It's actually not at all. Government policy plays a humongous role in shaping the choices that are available to us. Corporate policy, similarly. But one issue, we have this narrative that, oh, we vote with our dollar and I can make all this change. But no one ever says that about healthcare. No one says like, oh, well, choose a certain healthcare plan and then you're going to change the world. I don't really think that there's a credible pathway to transforming the food system that primarily relies on one consumer at a time changing what they buy. So given that, this political thing is not only shifting our focus to politics is not only maybe a more effective way of getting support among the public, but it's also ultimately, I think that's how we are going to change people's values. Like there's a feedback loop between public opinion and the law. People look to the law to tell them what's acceptable. And as long as, it's totally legal to do all these things to animals, people will think that that puts a lot of pressure on people to think that it's okay. It's fundamentally okay. And one way, ultimately, I think the way that we're going to change people's values is changing the law. And this gets into maybe something that's outside the scope of this call, but, it is possible for small minority groups that are really effectively organized to exert outsized influence on the political process.
Hmm. Well, and so, Aidan, I think this we should go into number two because, um, to me, the second one it really speaks to still this building this vision, of an animal, animal freedom future.
Yeah, so the second point is this second recommendation is using the metaphor of evolution to convey everything we've been talking about so far. And the reason that this deserved its own point instead of just being part of the first point, um, I mentioned that with direct action everywhere, we did have, and I don't know how familiar folks on the call are with DXE, but we from the very beginning of DXE, part of its theory of change was a lot of what I've been saying. That maybe we were skeptical of this kind of focus on veganism, both from a messaging standpoint and from a strategic standpoint. In hindsight, now, thanks to I think this research, I realized that our messaging around that pretty much fell flat. Like we thought we were saying we said DXE's language was we're not asking for individual change, we're asking for systemic change, and basically that just doesn't those words just don't mean very much to the general public. Like it didn't get the point across. People still thought we were talking about veganism and their diet, and they still felt personally attacked and got really defensive and all the things that you all experience whenever you're talking to people about these issues. So like I mentioned, that a key goal was to figure out how can we convey our values and our goals in language that the general public really understands. And so that is where this metaphor of like societal social evolution came from. This was language that the participants on our study started using, and then when we picked up on that and started using it with other participants, it really resonated. And what it does is convey the idea that we're admitting as a movement this is going to be a gradual change. It's not going to happen overnight. We that's just the reality. And so in a way that when we're really focusing on people's individual diets, we're kind of, or asking people to go vegan, we kind of are asking them to do a big change right away. Whereas this social evolution thing is saying, as a society, we're going to do a big change altogether, step by step, and it doesn't. All the responsibility doesn't fall on one person. Um,
So it's this idea of creating a new narrative in which we don't have to have a world where we farm animals. Is that right? Like
yeah, and I
that,
think
yeah.
it particularly came out of this something that we really found in our research, which again, if people want to look closer, this thing that I'm going to skim over is on like the website and stuff. But like I mentioned, so we would pull people into these interviews. We'd ask this initial question, what comes to mind when you think about animals used for food? And they'd say, oh man, it's really bad. I don't like to think about it. I feel so bad. When I go grocery shopping, I have to just try not to think about it. Tons of people said those exact words, try not to think about it. Then we'd get into that with them, and they'd have these different justifications, but they could kind of talk themselves out of those justifications. But they really look at it, they're like, well, I have, this thing about like, oh, it's natural or something, but that's kind of silly. But something that just came up over and over again was futility. Like people just thought, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter if I change. There's 7 billion other people who are never going to change. This is never going to change. And so it doesn't matter what I do. And this social evolution metaphor helped bring in, so this is a frame, and what it brought into focus was like, oh, it reminds me of other times that society has changed in really big ways, things that were just as big and unexpected as ending meat. And so one by using this metaphor to remind people of that, we sort of found that got over this futility in the sense, okay, yeah, it is possible for society to change slowly. And then we can get back to this conversation of maybe what does that ask of me right now?
Okay. And so what about, let's go on to number three.
So this one is maybe I've seen some questions popping up in the chat about, like why not both the sort of personal and the large scale. Our third recommendation is that the best way to actually achieve this shift that we've been talking about and actually have the public hear it is actually to use meat eaters to deliver that message. So this doesn't this might only work in specific situations. You yourselves on this call, if you're not a mediator, then you can't be a mediating messenger. But at the level of like an organization, or so for instance, in Colorado, we are running some ballot initiatives right now. And we really like to, if we're going to like put out a social media ad or, have a quote from someone who says something like, I still eat meat. I'm trying to eat less, but, I still eat meat. But I recognize that this is the right direction for our society to go. And what that does is, again, it shows, because people are so used to this consumer frame and they've heard the message of veganism, when we start talking about, some of these political changes, people are like, wait a second, are you guys vegans? Like, are you going for veganism? And part of where that is coming from is like, oh, well, like that's different from me. And I'm not, I'm going to sort of differentiate myself from this movement and then maybe I'm less likely to support it. And if we can have messengers who are explicitly saying, no, I actually eat meat, but I think that we should ban factory farms in my state because, I don't know. I think I still eat meat, but I think we should actually eventually not eat meat anymore. That person is so much more credible to the general public who also eat meat than someone who can't say that.
Like
Yeah.
somebody who's on the journey with them. It's like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
eat meat. I know that I need to start changing that habit, and this is where I'm speaking from.
Yeah. And then that shows you, look, you like it's a model for everyone who still eats meat and is not willing to go vegan tomorrow. Um, to see, oh, I could be part of this movement too.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it. And so one of the things that obviously, comes up when we're all talking amongst ourselves as animal rights advocates, is the whole idea of, the welfarist incremental thing, affecting the animal liberation thing. Now, I think it's important for people to know, Aidan, you're no welfarist. You've been a
Sure.
hardcore animal liberation activist for a very long time, right? And so how did you first react to finding these things out, and has it been hard for you to change, your framing?
Yeah. Well, so let me hold that question just on the
Yeah.
point about welfarism. I even want to double down on that from a public messaging standpoint. Like I maybe have softened on welfarism over time, like to think that there are different reasons that as a movement we might choose to still pursue welfare campaigns. There might be advantages to those. But from a public messaging standpoint, I think welfarism is particularly weak and really does not connect with the public. It's very uninspiring. So
Mm.
um, yes, this is not none of what I specifically don't want to be implying in any of this that what we should be adjusting our demands to be more welfarist demands. On the contrary, I think we should be looking for political demands or policy level demands that are clearly a step for society away from animal farming and towards a world without animal farming. Those kinds of policies that like, for instance, in Denver, we're trying to ban slaughterhouses in the city of Denver. And that's, the animals are just going to go to some other slaughterhouse in some other city. But we're trying to make it clear through our messaging, like, well, we're in Denver. This is where we can start. We're going to go other places. Like, we need to evolve away from farming animals. And a ban on slaughterhouses, I think, conveys that message a lot more clearly than something like bigger cages or slower line speeds, even if there's other reasons that we might choose to pursue those campaigns in different settings. Okay. How did I feel about, coming across this stuff? I think the hardest, for me, some of the moments, I don't want to say hard because it was really exciting once we actually got into it. And we were also just like immersed in this for so long that it was just exciting to find answers. And there were times when it felt like we weren't, you know, that it was just hopeless and all these people were just saying such horrible things about animals in our focus groups and interviews. And we're like, oh no, there's nothing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But what there were lots of moments where I was like, oh, like when we figured something out, and then I was like, wow, this in hindsight, now that I'm hearing these people, these like normal mediating people say this, it kind of seems obvious, but this is like totally different than what I used to do as an advocate. Like this is totally undermining a lot of things that I used to be really committed to. So an example of that would be, again, I mentioned in DXE, we had this message about it's systemic change, not individual change. Back in those years when I was really involved in DXE, everyone's aware that what DXE was really notorious for was disruptions inside of restaurants and grocery stores. And I understand why we were doing that and what our goals were. But now that I have the lens of this research, I realize that whatever we were saying in those disruptions didn't matter because we were disrupting people in the location that they were exactly most engaged in their consumer role. So we were just guaranteed to activate that consumer frame because people were, that like it's the worst time to be talking to these people is when they're literally eating meat or buying meat. Like
Because they're going to justify it
yeah,
to the ends of the earth if
yeah,
you're
that's
caught red-handed. Yeah.
yeah, that's like psychologically just the worst time to be talking to people. Any other time. So yeah, that was a revelation that was like, oh, I felt kind of silly about. And there were lots of things like that where I was like, oh, I can see now how lots of things that I've spent a lot of time doing were probably not very productive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for putting that sort of frame around it because I think it's important. As advocates, we also sort of evolve as we find, as we see more campaigns, as we see what's working, what's not working. Okay, so let's go on to number 4. Before we even leave that, because we're talking about policy and everything, remember, folks, that this whole civic mindedness over individual vegan messaging is also about plant-based procurement. Getting more plant-based options in the stores, in institutions, in schools, in everywhere. Like that's a
Yeah.
huge part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, the kinds of policies that I think would so fit with this goal of like policies that feel like they're creating a transition away from animal farming. Yeah. Meat free procurement or default veg procurement. Meat taxing meat is something we're going to be interesting in. The sales ban or the sorry advertising bans in the Netherlands that I know have gotten a lot of attention. I think that would trigger the exact right kind of thinking because people remember that happening with cigarettes, and that's this sort of narrative of like moving away from something. So there's all kinds of different very yeah great
Mm-hmm.
okay
Yeah, tons of things. Yeah, let's do it. And this one we probably
oh
don't need much time for. We
okay
it's pretty straightforward.
we've even kind of touched on it. So I mean, our fourth recommendation is to actually really bring in humane deception. So this is something lots of advocates are already doing. Focusing our messaging around the fact that like humane is a lie, humane myth is a lie. Talking about what we were just talking about with welfareism, actually very much leaning into in our public messaging, attacking those kinds of welfare labels, I think is a very effective strategy. And specifically, we had this messaging formulation, like it's no secret that cage-free eggs aren't actually humane or whatever. So that it's no secret, kind of just trying to create this perception or like talk about these humane myth issues as if everyone already knows it. And because people don't want to be like the one person who got fooled by like the deceptive corporate marketing, which is, so you're just like, oh, come on, dude, everyone knows cage-free. That's just bullshit.
So it's kind of like normalizing that there is deception and conspiracy in the industry, basically.
Yeah, but not just but that everyone else already knows, and you're the one sucker who hasn't figured it out yet.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, amazing. Number 5.
So our 5th recommendation is this is going to be a hard one to do concisely, but it also might not be the one we want to focus on. So I'll invite people, if you really want to explore this more, to go to the website. I mentioned before, so when we were in these conversations with people, there was that initial discomfort, and then they said, oh, I really try not to think about it when I go to the grocery store. But in the conversation of this interview, they'd be willing to think about it a little bit. And eventually they'd come to that futility objection, which was like pretty robust. And that was a really hard one for us to get around. But there were a bunch of other objections that were a little more slippery. But and the examples are like culture, tradition. People say things like, oh, well, I grew up eating those foods and it's really important for me to be connected to my grandma's recipes. Or, well, it's meat is such a big part of my culture. But we would hear from like, especially immigrants or children of immigrants would say, for me to remain connected with like my culture that I'm now, disconnected from because I live in this different country, like there's these meat dishes that are really important. Or natural, and these are all things everyone in college, I'm sure, has heard 1,000 times. This thing about naturalness, like, oh, it's the cycle of life, or it's part of the food chain, or it's how we evolved to eat this way. And I think when we hear these objections, we kind of roll our eyes and feel like, oh my God, this is so silly. I've dismantled this 1,000 times. And probably what I'm going to say is something you've all heard before or thought before, but well, what we saw in these interviews when these issues were coming up is people really, genuinely were grappling with these questions. These were not deflections, or just like, cheap ways of getting out of it. They were like really genuinely held things. Like this thing about, like trying to remain connected to my culture as an immigrant. Like that's a real value. Or, this sense of like that we've lost our connection to nature living in cities. And there's like if someone's feeling like a one thing that keeps me connected to nature is like eating animals. Again, we might all roll our eyes at that, but for the people we were talking to, this was like really genuine. And when so currently advocates focus all our messaging. So what specifically getting to the recommendation, advocates focus all our messaging on conveying the harms of animal farming. So if you're like designing a social media post, you're probably going to say a lot of stuff about how destructive factory farming is to the environment or how terrible it is for animals. A lot of the people in our focus groups, especially like urban people, younger people, more liberal people, they've heard a lot of that stuff before. A lot of that information actually has penetrated into the public, which is great. Like that's all the work that we've been doing as a movement for decades. We've made a lot of progress. So this recommendation is that if we should start spending more of our messaging budget. If we have a limited amount of like people's attention, it's, we only get people to listen to us a little bit, making a Facebook post or whatever, you're an organization making an advertisement. We should spend more of that budget talking about those kinds of objections that come up, and preempting them. Because if we never talk about those things, we kind of come across as like detached or like out of touch. That's the word that I want to use. Out of
alien.
touch.
We come across as a bit alien.
It seems like these are really genuine issues that people are wrestling with, and if we don't seem like we understand those at all, that's what gives them the license to say like, oh well, those vegans, like they don't understand my culture. They're like, it's just a bunch of white vegans who are whatever. If we can show that we actually empathize with those, not only like understand that where those objections are coming from, but even share like the core value behind it, even if we can totally disagree with the strategy. And in fact, that what we really recommend as an effective way to go about this is, find it, what's that core value, whether it's like, staying connected to nature or to culture. Like I share that value, and I can say, yeah, I celebrate that so much. And like, we can have that without killing animals for food. There's other, I can go on a hike. Like there's other things I can do to maintain that value that we both share. And if we can sort of proactively name those things rather than waiting until they're, brought up by someone else, it was really had people feel like, oh yeah, these people actually, understand what I'm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, got it. So it's kind of like being able to say, yeah, you're gonna miss the lasagna that Nana made, but what are the other ways that Nana? I mean, are there any other examples that you can
Yeah,
give
I
of
mean,
that?
let's take Nana's lasagna.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe to give some. Well, first acknowledge that, yeah, isn't it so important to like stay connected to our family traditions? Like, isn't there's the being connected to our ancestors, and you want to make Nana's lasagna because that helps you feel closer. Maybe she's not with us anymore. Um, now we can do Nana's recipe like without meat. Like we can replace the meat in that recipe.
Yeah, we can make Nana's lasagna even, friendlier to the
Right.
planet.
Yeah. We can adapt our traditions a little bit to
Mm-hmm.
be friendlier to animals, friendlier to the planet, and still keep them. We don't have to lose them all.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, yeah, it's not.
So this rolls right into number 6. And so it's kind of almost a little bit of a two-parter here.
Yeah, really, really, I would say we already talked about number 6. Number 6 is just give empathy. So 5 places the emphasis on let's do this proactively rather than only waiting for people to bring these up to us.
Yeah.
And 6 is just that empathy part of it. So giving empathy to those rationalizations, but finding that core value underneath that we can really resonate with.
Okay, so number 6 is give empathy to the rationalizations of meat eating public. So being able to, like, some of us, even in our one-to-one sort of messaging, somebody might say, yeah, but I really love my cheese. And you're like, well, the dairy
Baby cow didn't
cows
love your
love
cheese.
their
Yeah, yeah,
lives.
right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And so you're saying basically the lead would might maybe be like, oh yeah, like I really love cheese too. And now there's a bunch of, amazing plant-based cheese. And then when I heard about the dairy calves, blah blah blah, like
Yeah, sure.
using that to sort of enter in a little bit more. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. So let's go on to number 7.
Cool. So 7 is going to tie back to the conversation we were having earlier about what kinds of policy demands might give the narrative that create the narrative that we're trying to create. And specifically, it is to pursue policy demands that are focused on making animal-free foods more affordable and accessible. So this goes to another one of those justifications that we heard, which is that, oh, well, maybe I am uncomfortable with what happens to animals in slaughterhouses, but being vegan is like so expensive, or it's just not accessible to a lot of people. Be amazed, how regular ass people become like experts on food deserts and stuff as soon as you bring
Of course.
yeah, right. But I shouldn't say you'd be amazed because everyone on this call has
Yeah.
heard
Yeah.
that. But uh, it's another one of these things where we can actually turn that around and make that something that gives us a lot of credibility. So if we go out, if our policy demands, going back to, like, for instance, default veg or plant-based procurement, if we can come up with policies that are about addressing that and saying, yeah, let's make plant-based foods, plant-based eating more affordable and more accessible. Hey, that's just good policy. Like that is going to work. If we make plant-based, meat replacements cheaper, and more accessible, like they're in more places, it's going to work. That's going to have the outcome that we want. And it shows people who are making that objection, like, oh, these animal advocates, like, they actually understand where I'm at. They do care about, the fact that I'm trying to make ends meet with a limited budget, and they're pursuing this demand to make that easier. So
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah. And Aidan, just a little example. So I help run the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank. We're a vegan food bank. And I can't even believe over the years how much goodwill it's created within
Mm.
the regular public, and made people really curious about what we're doing. And it's been an amazing form of outreach and activism. So, yeah. And I wasn't convinced in the beginning when my partner said, let's do this. I'm like, no, that seems like it might be taking our energy away from where it should be.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was wrong. I was very wrong.
very cool. That's a great success story.
Yeah. Okay. Number 8. This one is a personal pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. So
Using exaggerated, yeah, using exaggeration. So you can tell it
great.
properly.
So yeah. So the recommendation is, use non-exaggerated facts and provide citations. So it's kind of a two-parter, but in our interviews and focus groups, one of the most common things we would hear people say is, and this is going to tie into the next recommendation as well, but I don't want, like, just give me the facts. Like, help me, like, let me make a decision based on the facts. They would say they really want facts. If we had, a message about, animal suffering, or, this emotional side of things, which we were talking about before. And so there's, take this with a grain of salt, because the emotional thing is really important, which we'll talk about in a second. But people think, that they want facts. So we do want to give them facts. Facts are really effective. We really recommend including facts in your messaging as often as possible, with two caveats. One is to err on the safe side, err on the conservative side of any facts. So, like, the really good example historically is the percentage of greenhouse gas emissions that can be attributed to animal agriculture. Our movement has claimed at times that it's as high as like 56% or whatever, more than half. And now maybe the vogue is to cite the UN statistic that it's like 14.5%. I don't know what's true, right? Like, it's this really complicated scientific question. It seems like, deforestation and aren't being taken into account in the 14.5% number. So it's like probably higher or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Like, 14.5% is high enough. It gets the point across. It gets the point across that this is a major, cause of climate change, and everyone who seriously cares about climate change should be changing their diet. Going on the high side of that spectrum really undermines our credibility. So if people, eventually, like, say the 50%, and they look it up and they're like, this says 14.5%. They were lying to me. Like, suddenly 14.5% sounds really small. But if we just lead with that and play it safe, guarantee our credibility. we find that's much more effective. Really recommend playing it safe with facts. People don't know enough about climate change and whatever. It's just before it works. And then the second part is to just be ready to provide citations, or if you're making a Facebook post, provide citations for everything. Not because people are going to click through the citation. I mean, 1 in 100 people will click through the citation, but people just want to see, like, so like I said, people said, oh, I want facts. And then we started adding facts to the messages we were testing. And they're like, well, who came up with that? I mean, maybe they were bought
Mhm.
off by the, big plant industry or whatever. Um, so people are
Industry love
now
it.
used to navigating an information environment online where there's so much misinformation, right? We all know this. And it's hard to figure out what's true. And
Absolutely.
nobody actually has the time to do it, to click through all these links. But just to provide a link, especially if you can provide a link that looks, it's to like Harvard or Oxford or some really authoritative thing. Again, no one's going to click through it, but just having it there shows like I've done my research, this is coming from these authoritative sources. So it makes you a lot more credible.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, we have been labeled, vegan movement has been, vegans, I should say, have been labeled as a little histrionic. So we need to be able to, we are all, if you've noticed in Facebook sort of, or other social media sort of debates, we're always the ones who are giving the facts. We're keeping calm, but we're still labeled as the histrionic ones. So we kind of have to double down on being the really well-sourced, really responsible reporters in this engagement sort of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that does lead directly into the next one,
Okay. Yeah. Let's do it.
which is to tone down emotional language without sacrificing emotional connection. So
How do we do
exactly what
that?
yeah, so good. How do we do that? We'll have some suggestions, but just to give what it means, like exactly what Kimberly we were just saying, like people are so primed to feel defensive in response to our messages. And one of the most common things we heard when we were testing messages in the focus groups is like, I don't want to be emotionally manipulated. Like this is emotional manipulation. And even just things like, we weren't showing slaughter footage or anything like that, but people would say, oh, this PETA group, like they showed me, they wanted me to watch this footage. And like, that's emotional manipulation. Like just watching footage of what's actually happening. People see that as emotionally manipulative, right? So people are really primed to like, shut down in response to our message. And we need to be careful about that. So just trust that the actual content of what we're saying is raw. It has emotional weight. We don't need to dial it up at all. So we recommend like don't use adverbs pretty much at all. Use like the plainest language you can. So like instead of saying, oh, these, animals are crammed into tiny cages and tortured and da 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 da, just describe it with like the most objective language possible and trust that the actual content of it is, emotionally impactful. Then a couple other, ways that we had of still needing to make that emotional connection, because that at the end of the day is the most important thing. People say they want facts, but really it's the emotion that is going, that does the trick. And in addition to just like, toning it, so but that like emotional language, people are primed to react to that. So and a couple other ways around this. One is, let images do the lifting for you. So if you're making a Facebook post, you want to have some, you want to be talking about what's happening. Use an image. In particular, what we recommend here is happy animals and images of animals thriving. We find so like I said, people found that slaughter footage like made them really shut down, and they saw that as emotionally manipulative. But just a picture of like a cute baby cow, like people would just be, oh my gosh, that cow's so cute. Like I don't want them to, go to a slaughterhouse, whatever. Um, People respond. We found that and it makes more of an emotional connection. I've learned since, so we're working with someone um, who does some design work for Doctors Without Borders, and he said that Doctors Without Borders has a rule in all their like website and email marketing and everything. Never use a photo that you wouldn't use if it was your own child. Like they want to present their patients in with dignity, and there's this real risk of like using these like really graphic images of little brown kids in the third world that just is not treated with very much sensitivity. And so they have this rule, like never use a photo that you wouldn't use if that was your child. And I think that's kind of a good spirit to take with animals. Like when we depict animals in these horrific situations and or they're like in the middle of being slaughtered, it's not, it's so shocking. And it's like, it just doesn't, I think, it's hard. It's too much for people to connect with that animal emotionally in that, when they're in that moment. Like it's just overwhelming. So, using pictures of these animals at their best, most of the time. Of course, there's times that people need to see slaughter footage. I'm not questioning that at all. But more of the time, I think we can rely on these other images.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's, I mean, so we at Animal Justice, we do investigations, we do undercover investigations, and it's very hard to get people to watch it. We've been experimenting with all sorts of ways, do how can we connect them to the individuals? How can we, sort of line it up so that there's not graphic footage in the first bit? How can we, keep bringing this out to systemic level? And it's hard. And also, I mean, as somebody who voices a lot of investigation videos, I keep it flat. There is no emotion. It's flat. It's, there is so much already being said in the pictures. I don't need to be emotional in how I deliver it. So it's, I guess, same kind of idea here.
Yeah, no, I mean, even just to dig into that example for a second, it's like if you imagine, two versions of the same footage, and number one is like, some weepy Sarah McLachlan music, and someone's, yeah, like really, intoning, like people read that as propaganda and they just really, pull away from that. Whereas if the more we can come across as like, we're the objective ones, we're just presenting you with information, and we're letting you make the connection. So that's another one of the strategies that we recommend for like making this emotional connection is rhetorical questions. Just at like include questions in our, and I'm sure people who do like one-to-one outreach, yes, lots of questions. Keep it up. We can even use questions in like advertisements. So, if we're buying social media ads or we're making a post on Facebook or whatever it is, messaging where we're not like literally engaging with someone one-on-one. We found questions to be a really effective way to like, show an image and then just ask a question in it. The difference, even if the question like is, so an example message that we used, was, um, nobody with a heart in their chest can see the footage coming out of slaughterhouses and not feel disgusted. We focus on our freedom, but what about theirs? And it's a question. And the answer is obvious. Like it's obviously a rhetorical question. But even still, that was like, we found that when we shifted to using that question format, it just asks, it invites the audience, the listener,
To
to make
think.
the connection themselves. And
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
feel like there's a little agency for them. Instead of they're being told what to think, they're like, well, what do I think? Yeah, okay, this is what I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, yeah, really big difference. So questions more across all different channels.
Yeah, I mean, the very first campaign I ever did was "Why Love One But Eat the Other" Subway
Mm,
ad campaign, and just that question was huge, a huge shift for people. It
that's a great
was,
example. Yeah.
back in 2009, and yeah, very, very big big question and big shift had a huge effect on people. Okay, so we did 9 and 10, and we have to we're going to have to let people go in 5 minutes. So let's get through the rest. Meticulously avoid jargon activist speech. Number 11. Can you
Yeah.
explain that real quick?
Just don't forget all the words that you know now that other people don't know, like CAFO or what. I mean, there's just so many examples, but we're steeped in this world, and it's one of the most alienating things we can do when we're messaging to the public is just use this jargon that people don't know.
Okay, number 12. This one's
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so there's this ongoing debate all the time in animal advocates. Oh, what's the most effective messaging, to focus on animals or to focus on environment or to focus on health? And if you accept everything that we've been talking about up until this point, which you might just wholeheartedly reject it, and that's okay. But if you accept it, all this like shift to the civic frame. In this lens, we think health-centered messaging is pretty counterproductive because only because it very much brings up this individualistic thinking. So there's great research that finds, health is one of just the last frontiers where Americans at least just kind of refuse to start thinking systemically. And when they see, for instance, like a study that I'm thinking of was, asking people if they see like that there's a high obesity rate in a particular community or something, overwhelmingly people just say, well, that's a result of their poor choices. just very much brings up choice, even when all the evidence is like, oh, well, but it's like concentrated in this community. There's probably some kind of systemic reason. So this health, and talking a lot about health, it just brings up this, well, what, like an nanny state's going to come in and change the law so that people make healthier choices? Like, screw that. That's not what we should do. So we advise against health-centered framing, health-centered messaging when we're talking about public policy.
Interesting. Yeah. Because that's really sort of goes against what we have heard from other studies that say, most that majority of folks go vegan for health. So you should focus on that one. So, yeah.
Let me even just really quickly in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's true that most of the public sees health as the most persuasive reason to change their diet. But that group of the public doesn't see health as very persuasive. They just see animals and environment as even less persuasive. Like that's this majority block of the public that's just not going to be persuaded to change their diet anytime soon. Mm. There's a segment of the public that's about maybe a quarter to a third of people who are more receptive to animal and environmental messaging. Those people are much more likely to change their behavior based on either of those altruistic messages. So the altruistic messaging is going to reach more people more, even though it's fewer people who are, rank that as the highest reason that they would consider changing their behavior.
That's okay. Thank you. Okay. Number 13.
Actually is exactly what I was just saying. So okay. Number 13 is treat the base persuadables in opposition differently. These different, we need to think of the society as not a monolith, and there's different kind of big blocks of people that relate to our issue in different ways. And a great example is what I was just saying.
Amazing. Okay. Number 14. I know we're breezing through these, but because I know we've covered a lot of the foundational, bits of this. So
yeah, and if people want to read through these on the website, they're explained in more detail there. So we can skim through it. 14 is just use the radical flank effect to legitimize more ambitious policy objectives. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I like this one. This is interesting. Tell us more.
So one thing that we were testing in our focus groups was different policy demands, like. Is it true that there was a bunch of people out there who would support banning meat or banning slaughterhouses? And the answer is not as much as maybe some of those surveys might lead you to believe. But what we did find is whatever, with a particular focus group, 4 or 5 people, we would put down a policy proposal on the table. We were using like a fictional news article about a ballot initiative. And at first, maybe the ballot initiative was proposing a ban on meat sales or a ban on, close all farms and slaughterhouses in a state or something. And people say, whoa, that's way too much. We can't do that. Let's do this. That's like, let's tax meat or something. Or let's, something else. And then to the next focus group, we would say, okay, here's the next round of focus groups. We do a bunch of these at a time. And the next round, we say, here's an article about a ballot initiative that's going to tax meat. And people are like, whoa, that's way too radical. We got to do something else than that. Just like subsidize the alternatives. And then the next round we do subsidize the alternative. Whoa, that's too much. Just do some kind of educational campaign. So it's like whatever what people were willing to entertain was shaped hugely by what we staked out as like, we could set the goalposts. So having somebody in the movement somewhere pursuing really radical, ambitious policy objectives, like a total, like ban on meat sales or whatever, makes everything else, it really works to make everything else look more reasonable and more, people are like, oh, well, let's do this thing instead of that crazy other thing. As you could wonder, maybe it has the opposite effect. Maybe one person doing some crazy thing in one place makes everything else untouchable. And maybe to policymakers, that might be true. But to the general public, the opposite is true.
It's like we got to at least float those ideas out there.
Yeah.
Okay. And last but not least, don't hold back when pitching media. Number 15, tell us what not holding back means.
Basically, there's this base segment that's about maybe a quarter to a third of the public who are pretty receptive to altruistic messages. Most journalists, like most people who work at like corporate media, just like where they come from in society, overwhelmingly they belong to that group. So these are overwhelmingly urban people who have gotten advanced degrees, and they're just like way more sympathetic to our thing. So when we're talking to journalists, like if we're used to the dance when we're talking to like general members of the public, if we're doing street outreach. When you're talking to journalists, it's like safe to assume most of the time that they're pretty much on board with like the climate stuff, Maybe they are lacking some information about the effects of animal agriculture on the climate, but honestly, they probably aren't. Um, we should set like our goals should with the media should be higher than they are with the general public. Basically, is what I'm saying. We should really be trying to convince the media of our ultimate goal of abolishing animal farming, because they're pretty close. Um,
Wow, it
yeah.
doesn't feel like it sometimes, but you're saying like in their own sort of personal understanding. So that we should really try to be working on sussing that out.
Maybe a way of thinking about it. There's a great formulation by a social movement scholar named Bill Moyer that there's kind of three times you need to win over the public. One is you just need like the first tipping point is just people being aware that there's a problem. And they can become aware that like there's kind of a problem without really, or at least aware that someone thinks there's a problem, right? Like for there to become awareness, oh, like factory farming, that's really being contested right now. And then the second tipping point is to decide that the status quo is unacceptable. But they might have decided that the status quo is unacceptable without having accepted yet the solution that the activists are proposing. That's where journalists are at. They overwhelmingly accept that like factory farming is not sustainable in the long term, but they haven't accepted our final demand yet, which is that there's no way to do small scale farming, for to feed the world or whatever. We just need to get rid of this. But so they're in that we we don't need to convince them anymore that factory farming is a problem. We're at that point where we just need to convince them of our solution. And yeah, that's all we need.
And so, yeah, so maybe like being a bit more aspirational with media people as opposed to assuming that they are on the other side and that they don't know shit.
Right.
Just really, yeah. Okay, amazing. Holy man, we got through all 15, Aidan. I'm giving you
There
a
you
high
go.
five.
There.
Woo!
Perfect.
And yeah, Aidan, like I really appreciate this, and like I know we have healthy pushback. I think everybody was civil. There's pushback, and there always is when discussing new ideas. This isn't the Bible. It's not necessarily, but it comes from a lot of research, and I think anybody who, there was something that twigged for them, you should definitely check out the research in more detail at the website. And Kirsten will drop that in one more time. But it certainly has given me so much to think about. I'm going to take a bunch of these, recommendations back to my team. And I'm really going to think about it in terms of how we form our campaigns. So lots of thank yous. This has been a wonderfully insightful session. Thank you very much, Aidan from Leanne. Really appreciate your work, Aidan. Lots to think about. Looking forward to really re-listening and checking out the website and blog. So, Aidan, thank you so much for being here. And like I said, that was a bit of a marathon, but we did it, and I think it was important to go through all 15.
Yeah,
Um,
I hope at least provides everyone what they need if you want to dig further.
Yeah, and you don't need to do a workout today now.
There you go.
Kirsten, can you bring us back to the gallery so that Aidan can see folks that are here? So, folks, can we give Aidan a great big Animal Justice Academy? Thank you. Thank you, Aidan. Thank you to you and Pax Vanna for doing this incredible research. Please keep going. What's the next one? What's the next thing that you're working on?
Well, we have another study that we put out more recently that was focused on, I'll drop the link in the chat as well. More internally on how to keep activists sustained and develop activists. Currently, we're pretty focused on this pilot campaign that we're running in Denver, Colorado, which is a pair of ballot initiatives I mentioned throughout the call. One would ban fur sales in the city, and one would close slaughterhouses. We're looking to kind of develop ballot initiative campaigns and political campaigns in general as more of a kind of template strategy to be used in places that have those, which unfortunately Canada does not. So
I know
we'll
it's
figure
one of
out.
the biggest problems we have politically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're working. I think our answer is in a lot of ways starting on a municipal level. So yeah. Okay, well, Aidan, keep up the amazing work. Folks, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who have stayed late with us, you're really committed, obviously. And I just want to remind you that I always forget about this, but AJA, of course, is completely free. The courses, the events, the resources. But if you'd like to help keep this initiative going strong, please consider giving a donation. Kirsten will drop that link in there. And I'll see some of you that are in Toronto tomorrow night at the Animal Justice Holiday Party. But for now, I'm just wishing you a wonderful rest of your week. So appreciate all of you for being here and for all the work you're doing. Mwah. Have a great one, everybody. Take care. Thank you, Aidan.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.